Marcus Chen watched his wife Sarah practice her morning routine in their small apartment, aboard the mining station Kepler-7. She moved with the grace of a dancer, each stretch and bend perfectly controlled. Her blonde hair caught the artificial sunlight streaming through their viewport, making her look almost ethereal against the backdrop of distant stars. "You're staring again," Sarah said without turning around. A smile evident in her voice. "Can't help it. Still can't believe you married a grease monkey like me," Marcus replied, sipping his coffee. The dark liquid was synthetic but tasted real enough. Everything on the station was artificial except for the love he felt for this woman. 2 levels down, David Park was having a similar morning with his wife Elena. The Russian-born engineer was reviewing technical specifications for the new mining equipment while David prepared breakfast. Their relationship had started as a workplace. Romance, both were part of the human contingent managing the deep space mining operations that kept the Terran Federation's economy running. The 4 of them had become inseparable over the past 3 years. Marcus and David worked the same shifts. Their wives had become best friends, and their small group represented something rare in the galaxy: genuine human happiness in the void between stars. The Kepler-7 station orbited a dead planet rich in rare minerals that powered faster than light drives. It was valuable enough that 3 different alien civilizations had attempted to claim it over the decades. The Terran Federation had negotiated mining rights through a combination of diplomacy, technology sharing, and strategic positioning. Humans had a reputation for being excellent miners and surprisingly good neighbors. Despite their relative newcomer status in galactic politics, that morning started like any other, until the proximity alarms began wailing. Marcus dropped his coffee mug as the station shuddered. Emergency lights bathed everything in red as the artificial gravity fluctuated. Sarah grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with concern. "What's happening?" she asked. Before Marcus could answer, Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm system. "All personnel to emergency stations. We have multiple contacts approaching at high velocity. This is not a drill." Marcus knew those contacts weren't friendly traders or Federation ships. Those would have announced themselves hours before arrival. He grabbed Sarah's hand and they ran toward the central hub, where David and Elena were already waiting. The station's main display showed 15 massive ships emerging from hyperspace. Their design was unmistakable. Long, predatory vessels covered in weapon arrays and armored plating. The Vorthak Empire had come calling. "Why are they here?" Elena whispered, her face pale. "We have mining agreements, treaties." David pulled her close. "Treaties mean nothing to the Vorthak when they want something." The Vorthak Empire was old, powerful, and utterly ruthless. They viewed younger species like humans as useful tools at best, disposable obstacles at worst. Their philosophy was simple: might made right, and they had plenty of might. Most species in the galaxy either served them or stayed far away from their territory. Captain Rodriguez appeared on the display, his weathered face grim. "This is Captain Elena Rodriguez of Mining Station Kepler-7. We are operating under lawful Federation mining rights. State your business." The response came in the form of a massive alien face filling the screen. General Zethkar of the Vorthak 4th Fleet was a nightmare made flesh. 7 feet of scaled hide, 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws, and eyes like burning coals. When he spoke, his voice was like grinding stone. "Human insects. You strip our ancestral worlds of their treasures, no more. You have 1 hour to evacuate before we reclaim what is ours." Rodriguez straightened. "This system was uninhabited when we arrived. Our surveys confirmed no sentient life, no previous claims." "We won't be intimidated." Zethkar's laugh was like breaking glass. "Your surveys mean nothing. This world belonged to our empire 2,000 years before your pathetic species learned to make fire. 1 hour, humans. Take your toys and leave, or we will take them from your corpses." The transmission ended. The next hour was chaos. The station had 1,800 people aboard: miners, engineers, support staff, and their families. The evacuation ships could hold maybe 1,000 in emergency conditions. Captain Rodriguez made the hardest decision of his career. "Essential personnel and families first," he announced. "We'll make multiple trips." Sarah squeezed Marcus's hand. "You should go with the first group." "You're not essential personnel." Marcus shook his head. "Like hell. We go together or not at all." David and Elena felt the same way. They'd helped build this place, made it their home. They weren't abandoning their friends and colleagues to face whatever was coming alone. The evacuation began with desperate efficiency. Ships launched toward the nearest Federation outpost, carrying those lucky enough to make the first group. Marcus watched the countdown timer with growing dread. 30 minutes. 20. 10. At exactly 1 hour, General Zethkar made good on his threat. The first wave of missiles struck the station's outer ring, where the residential quarters were located. Marcus felt the shock wave through the deck plating as their home vaporized in seconds. The Vorthak weren't interested in capturing the station intact. They wanted to make a statement. Hull breach in sections 12 through 18, someone screamed over the comm. We're losing atmosphere. Sarah was helping coordinate the evacuation from the operations center. When the second wave hit, Marcus saw her through the reinforced window, calm and professional even as explosions rocked the station around them. She was directing a group of children toward an escape pod when the bulkhead behind her erupted inward. The explosion threw her across the room like a rag doll. Marcus screamed her name and ran toward the operations center, but David tackled him as another missile impact sent debris flying through the corridor where he would have been. She's gone. Marcus, David said, his voice breaking. Elena, too. That whole section is open to space. Marcus stared through the window at the twisted wreckage where his wife had been standing moments before. The vacuum of space had claimed her body, but her final act had been to save those children. The escape pod had launched successfully. As the station continued to break apart around them, something cold and terrible settled in Marcus's chest. The Vorthak hadn't just destroyed their home. They'd murdered the two best people he'd ever known. They'd killed Sarah and Elena not for any tactical reason, but simply because they could. The rescue ships arrived 6 hours later to find the station a drifting wreck. Of the 1,800 people aboard, only 400 survived. Marcus and David were among them, pulled from an emergency shelter in the station's core. As they watched the debris field that had been their home drift past the rescue ship's viewport, both men made the same silent promise. The Vorthak Empire had made a mistake. They'd shown humans exactly what they were capable of when they stopped pretending to be civilized. And humans, as the galaxy would soon learn, were not ones to forgive. The Federation medical facility on Haven Station smelled like antiseptic and grief. Marcus sat in the white hospital chair, staring at his hands. They'd cleaned the cuts and burns, given him new clothes to replace his torn uniform, but they couldn't fix what was broken inside his chest. David occupied the next bed, his left arm in a sling from where debris had nearly crushed it during their escape. Neither man had spoken much in the 3 days since the rescue. What was there to say? Their wives were dead, their home destroyed, their lives shattered by an empire that viewed human suffering as a minor inconvenience. Gentlemen, I'm sorry for your loss. Marcus looked up to see Admiral Patricia Chen standing in the doorway. She wore the crisp blue uniform of the Federation Navy, her silver hair pulled back in regulation style. Her expression was carefully neutral, but Marcus caught the flash of anger in her eyes. Admiral, David said, attempting to sit straighter. Ma'am, she waved away the formality. Please don't, I'm not here in an official capacity. She pulled up a chair and sat down between their beds. I'm here because Sarah Chen was my niece. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Sarah had mentioned her aunt in the military, but never talked about her much. Family relationships had been complicated for Sarah. Her parents died when she was young, raised by various relatives who passed her around like an unwanted burden. Only her Aunt Patricia had genuinely cared. She was the best of us, Marcus managed. Always helping others, always seeing the good in people. Admiral Chen nodded. That sounds like Sarah. Elena Volkov was no different from what I've read in her files. Both of them were exactly the kind of people we need more of in this galaxy. David's jaw clenched. Were past tense. Because the Vorthak decided human lives don't matter. That's why I'm here, the Admiral said quietly. The Federation Council is drafting a formal protest. They'll demand reparations, maybe impose trade sanctions. Marcus laughed bitterly. Sanctions. Against an empire that just murdered 400 people because they felt like it. I'm sure they're terrified. Admiral Chen leaned forward. What would you have us do? Start a war we can't win? The Vorthak have 1,000 systems, 10,000 ships. We have colonies, not an empire. So we do nothing? David's voice was flat, dangerous. We file paperwork and hope they don't decide to kill more of us tomorrow? The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Not the careful tone of a diplomat, but something harder. Officially, the Federation will pursue diplomatic solutions. Unofficially, she reached into her jacket and pulled out 2 data pads. These contain everything we know about Vorthak military operations in this sector. Fleet movements, supply lines, command structure. Interesting reading. Marcus took the data pad with numb fingers.
Why are you giving us this?
Because sometimes official channels aren't enough. Because my niece deserves better than strongly worded letters and committee meetings. She stood up. I'll be transferring both of you to inactive reserve status due to psychological trauma. Full pay, full benefits, no assigned duties. Standard procedure for survivors. David caught on first. How long does psychological recovery usually take? Can be years, the Admiral replied, especially for cases involving severe trauma. Medical evaluations are scheduled every 6 months, but those can be postponed if the patients aren't ready to return to duty. She walked to the door, then paused. The freight captain who runs supplies to the outer colonies is named Jake Morrison. His ship is the Lucky Strike, docked in Bay 7. Strange man. Used to be Federation Special Operations before he went civilian. Word is he knows people who know people, if you understand my meaning. After she left, Marcus and David sat in silence for an hour. Finally, David activated his data pad and began reading. Marcus did the same. The information was extensive. Detailed intelligence on Vorthak operations throughout the sector. General Zethkar commanded a battle group of 15 ships, but that group was part of a larger fleet structure. Supply depots, communication relays, patrol routes, everything the Federation military would need to plan operations against the Vorthak. Everything 2 grieving husbands would need to plan revenge. Marcus, David said eventually. Look at this, he shared his screen. It showed the patrol schedule for Zethkar's battle group. They followed a predictable pattern, moving between systems to intimidate local populations and collect tribute. Their next stop would be the Proxima mining colony, where 15,000 humans work the asteroid fields. They're going to do it again, Marcus realized. Same demand, same ultimatum, same slaughter if anyone resists. David nodded grimly. Unless someone stops them. They found Jake Morrison in a bar near the docking bay drinking something that smelled strong enough to strip paint. He was a big man with scars on his hands and eyes that missed nothing. When they introduced themselves as Kepler 7 survivors, his expression softened slightly. Heard about that. Bad business. Empire types think they can do whatever they want to decent folk. He took another drink. What can I do for you boys? Marcus showed him the data pad. We need to get to the outer colonies. Specifically, we need to warn Proxima about what's coming. Jake scrolled through the intelligence data, his eyebrows rising. This is grade A military intelligence. Where'd you get it? Does it matter? David asked. Morrison studied them both for a long moment. You boys aren't planning to just warn Proxima, are you? This isn't about saving lives, it's about payback. Marcus felt something cold and hard in his chest. Our wives were murdered because they happened to be in the wrong place when a general decided to make an example. Yes, this is about payback. Good, Morrison said, surprising them both. Empire killed my brother on Castor Prime 5 years ago. Been waiting for a chance to return the favor. He drained his glass and stood up. Lucky Strike leaves in 4 hours. We can make Proxima in 6 days if we push the engines hard. As they walked back toward the docking bay, David grabbed Marcus's arm. Are we really doing this? Taking on an empire? Marcus thought about Sarah, about the way she'd died saving children she'd never met. About Elena, who'd spent her last moments helping others evacuate instead of saving herself. About General Zethkar's contemptuous laughter when he'd declared human lives worthless. We're not taking on an empire, he said. We're making sure the people who killed our wives pay the price. Whatever it costs. David nodded slowly. Whatever it costs. Neither man looked back as they boarded the Lucky Strike. Behind them, Haven Station continued its slow orbit around a dying star. Ahead lay the dark space between worlds, where empires thought they could murder civilians without consequence. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Jake Morrison sealed the airlock and headed for the bridge. The Lucky Strike wasn't much to look at, an old freight hauler with patches welded over patches, but her engines were newer than her hull suggested, and her cargo hold contained some very non-civilian modifications. Next stop, Proxima Colony, he announced over the intercom. Travel time 6 days. I'd suggest you boys use that time to figure out exactly what kind of war you want to start. Marcus stared out the viewport as Haven Station fell away behind them. In the reflection, he could see David doing the same thing. Both men wore the same expression, the cold, determined look of people who had nothing left to lose. The Vorthak Empire was about to discover what humans were capable of when grief turned to rage. The Lucky Strike dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Proxima system, her sensors immediately picking up the sprawling asteroid mining operation that employed 15,000 humans. Unlike Kepler-7's single station, Proxima was a network of interconnected facilities spread across 3 large asteroids, with smaller mining ships moving between them like busy insects. Marcus stood on the bridge next to Jake Morrison, watching the tactical display. "How long until the Vorthak arrive?" Morrison checked his calculations. Zeth Kar's battle group should be here in 36 hours, based on the intelligence data. That's not much time to evacuate 15,000 people. David joined them, carrying a steaming mug of coffee and looking more focused than he had in days. The journey through hyperspace had given both men time to process their grief and channel it into something more useful. "What if we don't evacuate them?" Marcus turned to stare at his friend. "David, these people have families, children. I'm not talking about sacrificing civilians," David said quickly. "I'm talking about turning Proxima into a trap instead of a target." Morrison's scarred face cracked into a grin. "Now you're thinking like a soldier. What did you have in mind?" David activated a holographic display showing the Proxima system. "Look at the layout. The mining operation uses fusion charges to break up asteroids for processing. Each facility has enough explosives to crack a mountain, but they're designed for controlled demolition." Marcus began to understand. "You want to turn the mining charges into weapons." "More than that," David continued, his engineer's mind working through the possibilities. "The Vorthak always use the same tactics. Overwhelming firepower, psychological intimidation. They'll move their capital ships in close to demonstrate their superiority before making demands." Morrison nodded slowly. "Classic Empire behavior. They want the enemy to see exactly how outgunned they are before they start shooting." "So we give them what they expect to see," David said. "A scared human colony ready to surrender. Meanwhile, we rig the entire asteroid field with charges and hide armed ships inside the smaller mining facilities." Marcus felt a spark of something he hadn't experienced since Sarah's death. Hope. It could work. But we'd need help. Ships, weapons, people willing to fight. Morrison walked to his communications console. "Let me make some calls. You boys might be surprised how many people have scores to settle with the Vorthak." The next 24 hours were a whirlwind of activity. Morrison's calls reached deep into the network of freelancers, ex-military and independent operators who worked the frontier colonies. Within hours, ships began arriving at Proxima. The first to respond was Captain Sarah Reeves and her crew aboard the merchant vessel Aurora's Dawn. She'd lost her husband to a Vorthak raid 3 years earlier, and had been waiting for a chance at revenge ever since. Her ship looked like an ordinary freight hauler, but Marcus could see the weapon ports hidden beneath false panels. Next came the Blackjack Squadron, 4 modified fighters piloted by former Federation pilots who'd been discharged for excessive aggression during border conflicts with various alien empires. Their leader, Commander Lisa Torres, had been court-martialed for attacking a Vorthak patrol ship that had accidentally fired on a civilian transport. The most surprising arrival was a delegation from the Kepler-7 survivors. Nearly 200 of the people rescued from the station had volunteered to return and fight. They arrived aboard 3 charter ships, carrying mining equipment that could be converted into weapons and a burning desire for justice. "This is insane," Dr. Helen Foster told Marcus as she stepped off one of the charter ships. She'd been Sarah's supervisor in the medical bay and one of her closest friends. "We're civilians, not soldiers." "The Vorthak didn't care about that distinction when they murdered our families," Marcus replied. "Besides, we're not asking anyone to fight who doesn't want to. But those who choose to stay will need medics." Dr. Foster looked around at the organized chaos filling Proxima's docking bays. Ships were being refitted with hidden weapons. Mining charges were being repositioned throughout the asteroid field, and volunteers were training with military equipment that definitely shouldn't have been available to civilians. "How did you get all this hardware?" she asked. Morrison appeared at Marcus's shoulder, carrying a crate of military-grade plasma rifles. Amazing what falls off the back of supply ships these days. Must be all that budget confusion at Federation Command. By the time General Zethkar's battle group entered the system, Proxima looked like exactly what it was supposed to be, a terrified mining colony preparing to surrender. The asteroid facilities continued their normal operations. Civilian ships moved in predictable patterns, and the only Federation presence was a single patrol corvette that immediately began broadcasting surrender signals. Marcus watched from the hidden command center they'd established inside Asteroid 7 as the Vorthak ships approached. 15 massive vessels, each one capable of reducing a planet to rubble. General Zethkar's flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds, was a kilometer-long monster bristling with weapons. "Remember," Marcus said into his headset, speaking to the 50 ships now hidden throughout the asteroid field, "nobody moves until they're in close. We only get one shot at this." The Vorthak followed their standard procedure perfectly. The battle group moved into the center of the mining operation, positioning themselves to provide maximum psychological impact when they made their demands. General Zethkar's massive face appeared on screens throughout the system. "Humans of Proxima Colony," his voice rumbled across all communication channels. "You have witnessed what happens to those who resist the Vorthak Empire. Surrender your facilities and evacuate immediately, or share the fate of Kepler 7, David." Monitoring the tactical display from his position aboard Morrison's ship, watched as the Vorthak vessels settled into their intimidation formation. "They're perfect," he whispered. "Right where we want them." On cue, Colony Administrator Janet Walsh appeared on the main screen looking appropriately terrified. "Please, General, we're just miners. We have families, children. We'll evacuate immediately." Zethkar's laugh was the same grinding sound Marcus remembered from their last encounter. "Wise choice, human insect. You have 2 hours to—" Marcus never let him finish the sentence. "Now," he said quietly. Across the asteroid field, 50 hidden ships powered up their weapons simultaneously. Mining charges detonated in carefully calculated sequences, turning massive rocks into deadly projectiles hurled directly at the Vorthak battle group. Fighter squadrons erupted from concealed hangar bays, their missiles already locked onto target. The surprise was complete. The Vorthak had expected terrified miners and found, instead, a coordinated military ambush, executed with precision that would have impressed Federation admirals. The first salvo crippled 3 enemy ships before they could raise shields. The second wave, consisting of converted mining charges launched by magnetic accelerators, punched holes through the hulls of 2 more vessels. Blackjack Squadron's fighters swarmed around the enemy formation like angry wasps, their plasma cannons targeting weapon systems and engine compartments. General Zethkar's roar of rage echoed across the communication channels. "Impossible! These are civilians." "No," Marcus replied, his voice cold as vacuum. "We're widowers." The battle was far from over. The surviving Vorthak ships recovered quickly from their initial shock and began returning fire with devastating effect. Their plasma beams vaporized asteroids and turned several of the hidden human ships into expanding clouds of debris. The Destroyer of Worlds alone mounted enough firepower to level a city, but the humans had advantages the Vorthak hadn't expected. They knew every rock, every hiding place, every angle in the asteroid field. They fought with the desperation of people who had nothing left to lose and everything to avenge. More importantly, they fought smart. Phase 2. David announced from his position aboard a disguised mining ship. Throughout the asteroid field, human vessels began retreating toward predetermined positions, drawing the Vorthak ships deeper into the maze of rocks and debris. The Vorthak took the bait, pursuing what they thought was a routed enemy. They had no way of knowing they were being led into the deadliest trap humans had ever constructed. As the enemy ships moved deeper into the field, Marcus smiled for the first time since Sarah's death. The real battle was about to begin. The Vorthak ships pursued the retreating human vessels deeper into the asteroid field, exactly as Marcus and David had planned. General Zethkar was screaming orders across the communication channels, his rage making him predictable. The Destroyer of Worlds led the charge, followed by the remaining 11 ships of his battle group. They had no idea they were flying into the most elaborate death trap ever constructed by human hands. Positions confirmed. David reported from his hidden observation post. "All enemy vessels are inside the perimeter." Marcus watched the tactical display. From the command center buried deep in Asteroid 7, Every Vorthak ship was now surrounded by human forces concealed among the rocks. The enemy had superior firepower, but they'd lost their most important advantages: superior numbers and freedom of movement. Execute convergence, Marcus ordered. What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations. From every direction, human ships emerged from concealment among the asteroids. But these weren't the same vessels that had appeared to retreat moments earlier. During their withdrawal, they'd rendezvoused with hidden supply ships and armed themselves with the most deadly weapons human ingenuity could devise. Captain Reeves aboard Aurora's Dawn was the first to fire. Her ship carried a massive railgun built from mining equipment, capable of accelerating chunks of metal to significant fractions of light speed. The projectile punched clean through a Vorthak cruiser's shields and armor, the kinetic impact turning the vessel into a rapidly expanding cloud of superheated debris. Blackjack's squadron had reformed during the retreat and now attacked in perfect coordination. Commander Torres led them in a high-speed assault on the Destroyer of Worlds, their fighters weaving between the massive ship's weapon arrays like dancers. Each pilot carried a personal grudge against the Vorthak, and it showed in their flying. But the real surprise was what the Kepler-7 survivors had accomplished. Dr. Helen Foster had worked with the mining engineers to create something unprecedented, a network of medical nanobots reprogrammed for military use. Released into the asteroid field's atmosphere pockets, they sought out Vorthak breathing apparatus and began systematically destroying life support systems. Impossible, General Zethkar snarled as his flagship's environmental systems began failing. Humans don't have this technology. We do now, Marcus replied over the open channel. We've had 3 days to think about how to kill you. Turns out humans are very creative when we're motivated. The Vorthak tried to break free of the trap, but everywhere they turned, they found more human ships waiting. Morrison had positioned his converted freight haulers to block the most obvious escape routes, while the fighter squadrons harassed any ship that tried to power up for hyperspace. The most devastating attack came from an unexpected source. Thomas Chen, Sarah's cousin and a quantum physicist who'd worked on Kepler-7, had spent the preparation time building something that shouldn't have been possible with civilian equipment. Using components salvaged from mining fusion reactors, he'd created a makeshift gravity weapon. Sarah would have called this crazy, he muttered as he armed the device. Elena would have helped me build it anyway. The weapon fired a concentrated burst of artificial gravity, creating a localized space-time distortion that caught 2 Vorthak destroyers in its effect. Both ships were crushed like tin cans, their massive hulls crumpling under forces that shouldn't have existed. Outside a black hole's event, General Zethkar realized too late that he was facing something entirely new in galactic warfare. Humans, who had stopped following the rules. Retreat, he ordered his remaining ships. All vessels emergency hyperspace. But David had anticipated this as well. During the preparation phase, he'd positioned gravity mines throughout the asteroid field, devices that would disrupt hyperspace fields and trap ships in normal space. The Vorthak found themselves unable to escape, forced to fight a battle they couldn't win. The Lucky Strike emerged from behind a massive asteroid, her hidden weapons now fully deployed. Morrison had installed military-grade plasma cannons and missile launchers, turning his innocent-looking freight hauler into a pocket battleship. His first salvo disabled a Vorthak heavy cruiser. "This is for my brother on Castor Prime," Morrison said as he fired again. The battle raged for 2 hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt once the trap was sprung. The humans had turned the entire asteroid field into a weapon, using their knowledge of the terrain and their superior tactics to overcome the Vorthak advantages in raw firepower. One by one, the enemy ships fell. The end came when Blackjack's squadron finally broke through the Destroyer of Worlds' defenses. Commander Torres led her fighters directly into the massive ship's main hangar bay, their plasma cannons targeting the ammunition storage areas. The resulting explosion lit up half the asteroid field. General Zethkar's final transmission was a roar of pure rage cut short by static. When the debris stopped flying and the last enemy ship had been destroyed, Marcus found himself staring at a tactical display that showed complete victory. 15 Vorthak warships destroyed, with minimal human casualties. "Status report," he said into his headset. The responses came back from across the asteroid field. 3 human ships destroyed, 11 damaged but repairable, 47 personnel killed and over 100 wounded, against an enemy force that should have been able to annihilate them without effort. Dr. Foster's voice crackled over the comm. We've got wounded coming in from all sectors. The medical bay is handling it, but we'll need supplies. Already on it, Morrison replied. I've got medical equipment in my cargo hold. Funny how that keeps happening. Marcus closed his eyes and felt something he hadn't experienced since Sarah's death. Satisfaction. Not happiness, not peace, but the grim satisfaction of a job well done. They'd proven that the Vorthak Empire could be beaten, that human lives weren't worthless, that murder had consequences. But David's voice brought him back to reality. Marcus, we need to talk about what comes next. The Vorthak aren't going to ignore this. When Zethkar doesn't report in, they're going to send someone to investigate. Someone with more ships. Marcus nodded slowly. The victory at Proxima was just the beginning. They'd drawn first blood, but the war they'd started was far from over. How long do we have? He asked. Morrison consulted his intelligence data. Based on Vorthak communication protocols, probably 2 weeks before they realize something's wrong. Maybe 3 before they send a response force. Then we'd better use that time wisely, Marcus said. Send a message to Admiral Chen. Tell her we've got intelligence data on Vorthak fleet deployments and a tested strategy for defeating them. Ask her if the Federation is interested in evening the odds. As the human ships began salvage operations among the wreckage of their enemies, Marcus allowed himself a moment to remember Sarah. She'd died trying to save others, refusing to abandon her post even when death was certain. He liked to think she'd approve of what they'd accomplished here. The Vorthak Empire had spent millennia teaching the galaxy that might made right, that superior firepower justified any atrocity, that resistance was futile. Today, a group of human civilians had taught them a different lesson. Sometimes the underdog bites back, and sometimes the bite is fatal. But as Marcus watched the celebration beginning among the human survivors, he knew this was just the opening move in a much larger game. The Vorthak would respond with overwhelming force, seeking to crush this rebellion before it could spread. They had no idea what they were really up against. Humans didn't just fight wars, they got better at them, and Marcus intended to teach the galaxy exactly what that meant. 3 weeks after the victory at Proxima, the war Marcus and David had started was spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. Lucky Strike now served as flagship for what the Federation media had dubbed Chen's Raiders, though Marcus refused to accept the name. To him, they were simply people who'd decided that enough was enough. The ship's cargo hold had been converted into a command center where dozens of human volunteers coordinated strikes against Vorthak targets throughout the sector. Intelligence update, Commander Torres announced as she entered the briefing room. Her Blackjack squadron had grown from 4 fighters to 23, with pilots arriving daily from across human space. Federation listening posts have intercepted Vorthak communications. They're mobilizing the Third Fleet. David looked up from the tactical hologram he'd been studying. How many ships? 67 capital vessels plus escorts. Admiral Kethrak is commanding personally. Torres paused. He's the one who ordered the massacre on New Geneva 5 years ago. 200,000 civilians. The briefing room fell silent. New Geneva had been the Vorthak Empire's most brutal example of what happened to species that resisted their expansion. Men, women, and children slaughtered simply to make a point about imperial power. Marcus studied the intelligence data flowing across his screens. In the 3 weeks since Proxima, Chen's raiders had destroyed 18 Vorthak ships and liberated 4 star systems. More importantly, they'd proven that the Empire could be beaten using tactics it didn't understand. But 67 capital ships was a different kind of problem entirely. Where's Admiral Chen? Marcus asked. En route with the Federation 4th Fleet, Torres replied. 12 ships, but they're frontline vessels with experienced crews. She's also bringing something special. The something special turned out to be Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the Federation's leading expert on xenobiology, and the woman who designed the medical nanobots that had been so effective at Proxima. She arrived aboard the Federation dreadnought Righteous Fury with a team of scientists and enough exotic equipment to outfit a small research station. Admiral Chen sends her regards, Dr. Warren said as she met with Marcus and David in the Lucky Strike's converted conference room. She also sends these. The data chips contained detailed intelligence on Vorthak biology, psychology, and military doctrine. More than intelligence. They contained vulnerabilities. The Vorthak evolved on a high-gravity world with a dense atmosphere, Dr. Warren explained. Their ships are built to accommodate this, with environmental systems that maintain specific pressure and gas mixtures. Disrupt those systems and their crews become significantly less effective. David leaned forward, his engineer's mind already working. The nanobots were just the beginning, weren't they? Dr. Warren smiled. The nanobots were proof of concept. What I'm proposing is much more ambitious. She activated a holographic display showing the molecular structure of Vorthak atmospheric processors. Every ship in their fleet uses the same basic life support design. They've never needed to vary it because no enemy has ever targeted their environmental systems specifically. Until now, Marcus said, understanding immediately. You found a way to turn their ships into death traps. Better than that, Dr. Warren replied. I found a way to make their own technology work against them. The plan she outlined was audacious even by the standards of people who'd already destroyed a Vorthak battle group using converted mining equipment. She'd developed a virus, not biological, but technological, that could infiltrate Vorthak computer systems and gradually alter their environmental controls. It would take days to show effects, she explained. The changes would be subtle at first. Slightly increased pressure here, altered gas mixtures there. By the time they realized something was wrong, their crews would be experiencing the equivalent of severe altitude sickness. Morrison whistled appreciatively. Diabolical, I like it. But how do we get close enough to deploy this thing? We don't, Marcus said, studying the tactical situation. We make them come to us. The trap they constructed at the Meridian Junction was even more elaborate than the one at Proxima. The junction was a natural hyperspace crossroads where 6 different star systems converged, making it a critical navigation point for ships traveling through the sector. More importantly, it contained the ruins of an ancient alien space station that had been abandoned for millennia. David's engineering team spent 2 weeks converting the massive derelict into a weapon. They installed hidden missile launchers in what had once been cargo bays, concealed plasma cannons behind collapsed bulkheads, and filled empty chambers with enough explosives to crack a moon. The most important addition was, invisible to conventional sensors, a network of transmitters that would broadcast Dr. Warren's virus to any Vorthak ship that came within range. This is insane, Captain Reeves said as she watched the final preparations. Her Aurora's Dawn was hidden inside one of the ancient station's massive docking bays, along with 30 other ships of Chen's raiders. We're going to fight 67 enemy ships from inside a space station that's already falling apart. Not fight them, Marcus corrected. Destroy them. There's a difference. Admiral Kethrak arrived exactly on schedule, his 3rd fleet dropping out of hyperspace in perfect formation. The Vorthak commander was everything Marcus had expected from the Butcher of New Geneva. Arrogant, brutal, and utterly confident in his superiority. Humans of this system, his voice boomed across all communication frequencies. You have defied the Vorthak Empire for the last time. Surrender immediately, and your deaths will be swift. Marcus activated the communication system from his position deep inside the ancient station. This is Marcus Chen of the mining station Kepler 7. You murdered my wife, Admiral. I'm here to collect the debt. Kethrak's laugh was even more grating than General Zethkar's had been. The insect who destroyed one of our battle groups. You have cost the Empire valuable ships, human. Your death will be particularly creative. You're welcome to try, Marcus replied. But first you might want to check your atmospheric readings. The confusion in Kethrak's voice was audible. What are you talking about? Dr. Warren's virus had been broadcasting for 6 hours, ever since the Vorthak fleet entered the system. Throughout the 3rd Fleet, environmental systems were beginning to malfunction in ways their crews couldn't detect or understand. Oxygen levels were dropping imperceptibly. Atmospheric pressure was shifting beyond optimal ranges, and trace gases that Vorthak physiology required were being filtered out of the air supply. The effects would build gradually over the next several hours, but the outcome was inevitable, an entire enemy fleet slowly suffocating in their own ships. You might also want to check your tactical sensors, David added from his position aboard a hidden weapons platform. I think you'll find some interesting readings. The Vorthak fleet suddenly realized they weren't alone in the system. Chen's raiders had positioned ships throughout the junction, concealed among asteroids and debris fields. But more importantly, Admiral Chen's Federation task force had just dropped out of hyperspace behind the enemy formation. 12 Federation ships against 67 Vorthak vessels wasn't a fair fight under normal circumstances. But these weren't normal circumstances. Half the enemy crews were already beginning to feel the effects of oxygen deprivation, their reaction time slowing and their judgment becoming impaired. The battle that followed became known as the Meridian Massacre. Admiral Chen's dreadnought Righteous Fury opened fire first, her heavy plasma cannons targeting the Vorthak flagship. But the real devastation came from the ancient station itself, which revealed its true nature as the galaxy's most elaborate weapons platform. Missiles erupted from hidden launchers throughout the derelict structure. Plasma beams lanced out from concealed weapons arrays. The station's massive size had allowed David's engineers to install weaponry that would have been impossible to mount on conventional ships. But the most effective weapon was Dr. Warren's virus. Across the Vorthak fleet, crews were collapsing at their posts as their ships' environmental systems turned against them. Some vessels began firing randomly, as panicked crews lost the ability to think clearly. Others simply drifted helplessly as their command structures broke down. Admiral Kethrak realized too late what was happening to his fleet. All ships emergency evacuation protocols. Abandon ship. No, Marcus said quietly. You don't get to run away this time. The ancient station's final surprise was a gravity field generator that David had somehow managed to restore to working order. When activated, it created a localized distortion that prevented any ship from entering hyperspace. The entire Vorthak fleet was trapped, forced to fight and die in normal space. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, 67 Vorthak capital ships had been reduced to drifting wreckage. Admiral Kethrak's flagship was among the last to fall, destroyed by a coordinated missile strike from Chen's raiders. But victory came at a cost. 8 Federation ships were destroyed, including 2 heavy cruisers. Chen's raiders lost 15 vessels, with Captain Reeves among the casualties. The ancient station itself was so badly damaged that it finally collapsed, taking with it the most effective weapons platform humans had ever constructed. Grand Admiral Vorthak, Supreme Commander of the Vorthak Imperial Forces and personal champion of the Emperor, had ruled space battles for 3 centuries. He had crushed 17 species into extinction, conquered 43 star systems, and never once tasted defeat. Standing 12 feet tall with 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws, his scarred hide bore the markings of 1,000 victories. The bridge of his flagship, Annihilator of Worlds, was decorated with the skulls of enemy commanders who had dared challenge Vorthak supremacy. He intended to add human skulls to that collection very soon. Status. Report, he rumbled to his tactical officer. The 1st Imperial Fleet is in position, Grand Admiral. 200 capital ships, 50 planet-killer dreadnoughts, and 800 escort vessels. Long-range sensors detect human forces gathering at the Terra Nova system. Vorthak studied the tactical display with the eye of a master strategist. The humans had chosen their final battlefield well. Terra Nova was a heavily populated system with extensive orbital infrastructure, forcing the Vorthak to either avoid civilian casualties, showing weakness, or accept responsibility for massive genocide, potentially turning other species against the Empire. Clever insects, he murmured, but cleverness will not save them from superior firepower. What the Grand Admiral didn't know was that the humans had spent the past month preparing for this exact battle. Terra Nova wasn't just their final stand. It was the most elaborate trap ever conceived by human military minds. Marcus stood in the command center aboard New Kepler Station, the massive orbital facility that had been constructed in record time above Terra Nova's primary world. The station was 10 times larger than the original Kepler-7, its corridors bustling with activity as humans and their alien allies prepared for the battle that would decide the fate of the galaxy. Final count? He asked Admiral Chen, who had arrived with the combined forces of 6 species that had joined the human rebellion. 43 Federation ships, 37 vessels from our alien allies, and 86 ships from Chen's raiders, she replied. Against 200 Vorthak capital ships plus escorts. The numbers should have been hopeless, but Marcus had learned not to fight fair. David appeared at his shoulder, carrying a datapad that contained their most dangerous secret. The nanobotic network is fully deployed, David reported. Every ship in our fleet, every station in the system, every piece of equipment we've built in the past month. All of it is now connected through quantum entanglement communication. Dr. Warren joined them, her face showing the exhaustion of someone who had pushed the boundaries of science beyond all reasonable limits. The collective processing power is unprecedented. We're essentially turning the entire Terra Nova system into a single, enormous computer capable of coordinating tactics in real time. Admiral Chen looked skeptical. You're talking about controlling 1,000 different vessels and installations as if they were one ship. The computational requirements alone are being handled by every human brain in the system, Marcus finished. Voluntary neural interface links. Anyone who wants to contribute their mental processing power to the collective defense. The plan was audacious even by human standards. Using modified versions of the neural implants that allowed deep space miners to control heavy machinery with thought alone, they had created a network that linked human consciousness with artificial intelligence. Not a hive mind, but something unprecedented, a collaborative intelligence that could process information and coordinate responses at speeds no individual mind could achieve. 50,000 volunteers had agreed to link their minds to the defense network. Among them were the survivors of Kepler-7, the families of those killed in Vorthak raids, and thousands of others who had decided that freedom was worth any risk. Sarah's memory was part of that network now, preserved in the quantum matrices that Marcus had built to honor her. Elena's as well, and Captain Reeves and all the others who had died fighting for human dignity. Their knowledge, their experiences, their tactical insights would guide the final battle. When the Vorthak 1st Imperial Fleet arrived at Terra Nova, they found what appeared to be a desperate last stand. Human and allied ships were arranged in defensive formations around the planet, exactly as conventional military doctrine would suggest. The massive new Kepler station orbited serenely, its weapons powered but not yet aimed. Grand Admiral Vorthak smiled as he surveyed the enemy positions. Begin the demonstration. I want them to understand the futility of resistance before we destroy them. The first wave of planet-killer dreadnoughts moved forward, their massive plasma cannons charging for what would normally be an intimidation shot. Enough firepower to vaporize a city, fired harmlessly into space to show the enemy what awaited them. Instead, they found themselves flying into a maze of invisible threads. Throughout the Terra Nova system, David's engineering teams had deployed millions of nanoscale devices connected by quantum-entangled particles. To conventional sensors, they were undetectable. To the collective intelligence coordinating human defense, they provided real-time information on every enemy ship's position, speed, and tactical status. Now, Marcus said quietly, what happened next redefined space warfare forever. Every human and allied ship moved simultaneously with perfect coordination, as if controlled by a single master tactician with impossible reflexes. They didn't fight like a fleet of individual vessels. They fought like the fingers of an enormous hand, each movement perfectly timed to support the others. The planet-killer dreadnoughts found their intimidation formation had become a killing ground. Missiles appeared from every direction, not fired at random but precisely calculated to arrive at specific points in space-time where enemy ships would be vulnerable. Plasma beams lanced out in coordinated patterns that overwhelmed individual shield generators. But the real surprise was New Kepler Station itself. As the Vorthak fleet closed to weapons range, the massive structure began to unfold like a mechanical flower. What had appeared to be a single orbital facility revealed itself as dozens of interconnected battle platforms, each one equipped with weaponry that defied conventional physics. Dr. Warren's final innovation was a gravity lance, a focused beam that could alter spacetime itself within a limited area. When fired at an enemy ship, it created localized gravitational distortions that crushed vessels from within, collapsing their hulls regardless of armor thickness. Impossible, Grand Admiral Vorthak roared, as his tactical display showed enemy contacts multiplying impossibly. These are mining ships and civilian vessels. No, Marcus replied across the open communication channel, his voice carrying the combined will of 50,000 human minds. These are the people you should have left alone. The battle raged across the entire star system. Vorthak dreadnoughts found themselves outmaneuvered by converted freight haulers that moved with impossible precision. Fighter squadrons attacked in patterns that seemed to anticipate enemy responses before they were made. Even damaged human ships continued fighting with perfect tactical coordination, their crews linked to the collective intelligence that guided every movement. The most devastating moment came when the Vorthak attempted to use their ultimate weapon, the Annihilator of Worlds. Planet-cracking cannon, designed to split terrestrial worlds in half, the massive energy beam lanced toward Terra Nova's primary colony, carrying enough force to kill 50 million people. It never reached its target. The collective intelligence had anticipated this attack, positioning a network of gravity field generators to intercept the beam. Instead of destroying a planet, the weapon's energy was redirected back toward the Vorthak flagship through a controlled space-time distortion. The Annihilator of Worlds destroyed itself with its own ultimate weapon. Grand Admiral Vorthak died as he had lived in the fury of battle, refusing to surrender even as his flagship disintegrated around him. His last words were a curse against the human species that had ended his 3 centuries of victory. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it ended, the Vorthak First Imperial Fleet had been utterly annihilated. 200 capital ships, 50 planet-killer dreadnoughts, and 800 escorts, all reduced to drifting debris around Terra Nova. Human casualties were surprisingly light, thanks to the collective intelligence's ability to coordinate defensive maneuvers with impossible precision. 17 ships destroyed, 43 damaged, and fewer than 2,000 killed against the most powerful military force in the galaxy. As Marcus watched the last enemy contacts disappear from his tactical display, he felt a strange mix of satisfaction and emptiness. Sarah was avenged. Elena was avenged. The Vorthak Empire's reign of terror was broken, possibly forever. But victory felt hollow without the people they'd fought to honor. Admiral Chen appeared beside him in the command center, her uniform scorched from a hull breach on her flagship. "It's over, Marcus. The Vorthak Emperor is broadcasting surrender terms to all human colonies, complete withdrawal from our territory, reparations for damages, recognition of human sovereignty." Marcus nodded, but his attention was focused on something else, a message that had appeared on his personal communication system. Text only, source unknown, but he recognized the writing style immediately. 1 year after the Battle of Terra Nova, Marcus Chen stood in the memorial garden aboard New Kepler Station, watching the sunrise over the planet where humanity had made its final stand against tyranny. The garden was Sarah's idea, or rather the idea of the consciousness fragment that had emerged from the quantum network during the battle. The memorial contained 50,000 names, one for each person who had linked their mind to the collective defense network. Most had survived the battle, but all had contributed something irreplaceable to humanity's victory. Their thoughts, memories, and tactical insights had been preserved in the quantum matrices that now formed the backbone of human space defense. "Beautiful morning," David said, joining his friend at the observation window. The engineer looked older than his years, but more at peace than he'd been since Elena's death. "The delegation from the Altarian Republic arrives today. They want to discuss joining the coalition." Marcus nodded. The Terra Nova coalition had grown far beyond what anyone had imagined possible. 17 species had joined the alliance formed in the aftermath of the Vorthak defeat, creating the first truly democratic interstellar government in galactic history. More applications arrived every month from worlds that had lived under imperial rule for centuries. "Any word from the Vorthak territories?" Marcus asked. "The civil war is still raging," David replied. 3 different factions claiming to be the rightful heirs to the Empire, all of them fighting over the scraps. Admiral Chen thinks it'll be years before they're stable enough to threaten anyone. The fall of the Vorthak Empire had been swift and catastrophic. When news of the First Imperial Fleet's destruction reached the capital world, the Emperor had been assassinated within hours by his own generals. Without the central authority that had held their vast territories together, the Empire had fractured into dozens of competing warlord states. Some coalition members had advocated immediate intervention to prevent further violence, but Marcus and the other senior leaders had chosen a different path. Let the Vorthak settle their own affairs. Humanity had learned the hard way what happened when powerful civilizations imposed their will on others. "Marcus?" The voice was soft, familiar, and impossible. He turned to see Dr. Warren approaching with a small quantum communication device in her hands. "She wants to speak with you." The device projected a holographic image, not of Sarah as she had been, but something that resembled her essence distilled into pure information. The consciousness fragment that had emerged from the battle network was definitely Sarah, but also something more and something less than the woman he had married. "Hello, my love," the image said, her voice carrying harmonics that touched his mind directly. "You look tired," Marcus smiled. Even as a quantum construct, Sarah worried about his health. "I've been working too much. David keeps telling me to take a vacation." "David is right. You've spent a year building something beautiful, Marcus. The coalition, the memorial network, the new technologies that are spreading peace instead of war. Sarah would be proud." "Sarah is proud," Marcus corrected gently. "You're her. Different, but still her." The hologram flickered, and for a moment, Marcus glimpsed the vast intelligence network that connected human space. Millions of minds working together to solve problems, share knowledge, and prevent the kind of tragedy that had started their war. "I'm what she became when her love for you was preserved in quantum space," the construct said. "But I'm also the combined wisdom of everyone who died fighting for freedom. Elena is here too, and Captain Reeves, and Thomas, and thousands of others. We're all part of something larger now." David stepped closer to the projection. "Have you found anything? About the others?" The search for other species with similar collective intelligence capabilities had become one of the Coalition's primary research projects. If humans could create such networks, surely other civilizations had discovered the same principles. "3 possibilities," Sarah's construct replied. "The Cedian archives mention a species called the Harmonic Builders, who constructed wonders beyond current understanding before vanishing 2 million years ago. The Kepler ruins contain technology that might be compatible with our neural interface systems, and the signals from the galactic core are definitely artificial, possibly from a vast collective intelligence." Marcus felt a familiar stirring of curiosity. For the past year, he'd been content to serve on the Coalition Council and help build the peaceful galaxy Sarah had always dreamed of. But the scientist and explorer in him yearned for new challenges, new discoveries. "How long for a research expedition to reach the galactic core?" he asked. Dr. Warren consulted her datapad. "With the new hyperspace drives based on Vorthak technology, about 18 months. But the radiation levels near the core are dangerous, and we have no idea what we might find there." "Sounds perfect," David said with a grin. "When do we leave, we?" Marcus looked at his friend. "David, you've got responsibilities here. The Coalition needs experienced engineers." "The Coalition needs experienced engineers everywhere," David replied. "Besides, Elena's construct says she's curious about those galactic core signals too. Apparently they contain mathematical sequences she finds fascinating." Marcus looked around the memorial garden, at the names of friends and strangers who had died to stop an empire's cruelty. They had succeeded beyond their wildest hopes. The galaxy was more free and peaceful than it had been in millennia. The tyrannical systems that had oppressed countless worlds were crumbling under the weight of their own injustice. But peace, Marcus realized, didn't mean the end of exploration or discovery. If anything, it meant the beginning of something greater, the chance to seek knowledge and wonder instead of revenge and survival. "Jake Morrison still has the lucky strike," he said thoughtfully. "Think he'd be interested in a little trip to see what's at the center of the galaxy?" Morrison's laughter echoed across the communication channel when they contacted him. "Marcus, my boy, I've been hauling freight for a year. I'm dying of boredom. When do we leave?" 3 months later, the research vessel Lucky Strike departed Terra Nova on humanity's first expedition to the galactic core. Her crew included the finest scientists and explorers the Coalition could provide, along with quantum communication devices that kept them linked to the vast intelligence network that had become humanity's greatest achievement. Marcus stood on the bridge as the ship jumped to hyperspace, watching the stars stretch into lines of light. Beside him, David was already planning modifications to their equipment based on theories from Elena's construct. Behind them, Sarah's holographic presence provided a connection to all the wisdom and love that had driven humanity to greatness. They were explorers again, not warriors. Scientists instead of soldiers. The galaxy lay open before them, full of wonders yet to be discovered and civilizations yet to be befriended. "Sarah," Marcus said quietly, "what do you think we'll find out there?" Her laugh was like music across quantum space, carrying the joy of 50,000 minds working together toward a common goal. "I don't know, my love. But whatever it is, we'll face it together, all of us, forever." The Lucky Strike disappeared into the swirling energies of hyperspace, carrying humanity's hopes and dreams toward the unknown heart of the galaxy. Behind her, the Terra Nova Coalition continued to grow and prosper, a beacon of freedom in a universe that had forgotten what democracy looked like. And in the quantum networks that connected every human world, the consciousness fragments of Sarah Chen and Elena Volkov watched over the civilization their sacrifices had helped create. They had died as individuals but lived on as part of something greater, the collective spirit of a species that refused to accept that might made right. The galaxy had learned an important lesson from two human brides and their grieving husbands. Some things are worth fighting for, and love is the strongest force in the universe. Even death couldn't destroy it. It could only transform it into something eternal. The Vorthak Empire was gone, crushed by its own cruelty and the determination of people who refused to be victims. In its place grew something unprecedented, a galactic civilization based on cooperation instead of conquest, guided by the wisdom of collective intelligence and the memory of those who had died for freedom. Marcus Chen had set out to avenge his wife's murder. Instead, he had helped create a new kind of future, one where such murders would become impossible because no species would ever again have the power to oppress others. It was, he thought as the lucky strike carried him toward new adventures, exactly the kind of ending Sarah would have written herself.